More than 18 million souls vanished into the Soviet system. They were swallowed by the Gulag machine. But what if I told you that the true horrors of the Soviet Gulag were never about killing quickly, but about designing a process to systematically erase a human being? Men were forced to dig their own resting places in the permafrost. Women disappeared not just physically, but psychologically in blizzards. Guards treated human suffering as entertainment, laughing as starvation became the only law. Survivors who made it out called it a glimpse into a cosmic abyss. Before we dive into the 10 most shocking methods of slow torture used in these camps, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. And let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Number 10. The Siberian Grindstone. The forced labor wasn't work. It was a calibrated effort to shatter bones and will in the Siberian freeze. The Gulag's purpose was to harness the bodies of its prisoners until they were used up. Every sunrise brought a mandatory death march through snow so deep it buried their boots whole. Prisoners were driven into dense forests and deep mines, equipped with nothing but rusty, inadequate tools and their bare hands. Temperatures plunged below -40 degrees Celsius. Frost didn't just bite. It cracked the skin, and their very breath solidified instantly upon exhalation. Each day required an impossible quota, moving literal tons of earth, felling massive trees, or hauling heavy stones. Failure to hit the target meant losing the already meager daily food allowance. The guards openly referred to this as Darwinian selection. The infamous Road of Bones, the Kolyma Highway, earned its name because the frozen foundation held more human remains than simple gravel. Varlam Shalamov, a survivor, wrote that anyone who survived 2 full winters gained the strength of 10 men. Nights offered no relief. The barracks were a suffocating mix of illness, sweat, and smoke. Lice were constant, and the sodden blankets never dried. Often, the silence meant someone had just died quietly in the darkness. Each morning began with the chilling question, who is next? The Gulag measured its success in deaths, not output. Yet, before the body gave out completely, there was a deeper agony to inflict. This was the next weapon. Starvation, a slow, internal killer. Number 9. The weaponized meal plan. Prisoners were starved for so long they resorted to consuming scraps of leather and gnawing on candle wax just to remain alive. Food in the Gulag was never nutrition. It was a potent tool of control. Every crumb of bread decided who lived another day and who collapsed lifelessly in the snow. Heavy laborers were given a daily ration of only 300 g of bread, less than half what the body needed. Missed the quota even once, and the ration dropped to a starvation level 100 g. This provided under 400 calories, far less than what a small child requires for survival. Men desperately boiled their leather belts and scraped the glue off their boots. They risked their lives searching rubbish pits for frozen potato peels or discarded animal bones. In camps like Vorkuta and Norilsk, desperation turned friends into enemies. A man might trade his only coat for a bowl of soup, which contained no actual meat, just water and salt. The brutal winter only intensified the crisis. Frost destroyed the few vegetables grown in the camp gardens. The carcasses of dead horses became prized feasts. In Kolyma, workers dug through snow for partially buried carrion to cook. Shockingly, some resorted to cooking human flesh from unburied corpses, an act many could never speak of again. The human body can resist hunger for a time, but the cold breaks the spirit much faster. This was the next level of calculated cruelty. Number 8. The frost disciplined the snow. Prisoners were forced to stand barefoot until their flesh turned black and lifeless. Cold was not a condition, it was a punishment method. The guards didn't need guns or shackles, they had Siberia itself. Prisoners endured hours outside, often semi-nude, in temperatures that sank to $50*circ/text $. Skin froze solid within minutes. Toes shattered. Breath crystallized instantly on their lips. In several camps, this torture was simply called the stand. Some collapsed and froze solid before touching the ground. Others had to stand barefoot until the soles of their feet split open. Guards would mock them, claiming the frost was teaching them obedience. Reports from Norilsk and Vorkuta mention men who were forced to balance large buckets of water on their shoulders in the cold, watching the water turn to ice before they were allowed to move. A survivor, Ivan Panin, stated that the silence was worse than the agony. He remembered hearing the frost eating away at his skin. The worst part came after. After hours in the frigid air, prisoners were thrown back into heated barracks. The sudden change in temperature instantly destroyed skin tissue and muscle. Many never walked again. The Gulag used the weather as its ultimate weapon. But when physical pain became normalized, the brutality escalated. The next punishment came directly from the human hand. Number 7. The rhythmic humiliation men were battered with rifle butts until their blood mixed and froze with the ice beneath them. Violence permeated every square meter of the Gulag. Guards were drilled to dismantle bodies, not just detain them. A dropped tool, a moment of slowness, or even a perceived wrong look could earn a rifle butt to the ribs. Some guards preferred heavy rubber truncheons. Others used boots fitted with iron cleats. Beatings were a daily ritual, often without any immediate cause. Survivors reported that the punishment was designed to ensure constant, crushing fear. One guard, Kuznetsov, was infamous for breaking noses with a single, brutal strike. Work accidents were automatically treated as disciplinary problems. A man crushed by logs was blamed for carelessness. His rations were actually deducted on paper after his death, as if he were still alive and consuming them. Some prisoners begged for a bullet instead of continued beatings. It was quicker and less demeaning. Female prisoners faced double cruelty. Guards dragged them by the hair into the snow, using sexual humiliation as a primary control tactic. Bruises were expected in the women's barracks. Survivor Eugenia Ginsburg wrote that the blows followed a rhythm: morning, noon, and night. She said they learned to stay silent because crying would only provoke harder hits. When fists grew tired, the guards deployed another form of torture, one that worked through stillness and darkness. Number 6. The black box of madness prisoners were sealed in airless, dark confinement cells until their minds completely fractured. The Gulag's isolation cells were named the box. They were reserved for those who dared to speak loudly, move too slowly, or question a guard's order. These boxes were rarely over 2 meters long and 1 meter wide, barely enough space to lie down. There was no bed, no window, and no functioning toilet. Just a hole in the floor and a bucket that froze solid in winter. Prisoners were locked away for days, sometimes weeks, in total darkness, losing all sense of time. Food was delivered once a day, usually a few spoons of watery soup and a crust of bread. The walls perpetually wept with dampness, and rats crawled over the sleeping men. Those who entered with a sound mind rarely emerged whole. Some began screaming at voices that didn't exist. Others forgot their names or how to form complete sentences. A prisoner named Alexander Dolgin recalled counting his own heartbeat to stay sane. When he lost count, he began singing children's songs until his throat bled. In some camps, guards created wet cells. They flooded the floor with freezing water, forcing prisoners to stand all night or risk drowning in centimeters of thin ice. If they fainted, they were left where they fell. Silence shattered people faster than pain. Many begged to be sent back to hard labor just to hear another human voice. But since sleep was the only escape left, the next method ensured that even this small mercy was revoked. Number 5. The calculated collapse. Sleep, the body's last defense, was turned into a weapon of total mental annihilation. Interrogators understood a terrifying truth. A brain deprived of rest long enough will break down its own defenses, believing and reciting any lie placed before it. Some detainees were held awake for 5, 6, or even a horrific 10 days straight. Lamps blazed all night, and guards screamed non-stop. Buckets of frigid water were constantly thrown on their faces the second their eyelids began to droop. In Moscow's notorious Lubyanka prison, the method was elegantly simple. The prisoner was forced to stand. The moment they swayed, sat, or collapsed, they were viciously beaten with a belt. Later medical examinations of Gulag survivors proved that 4 days, 96 hours, of sleep deprivation could trigger total organ failure and psychotic breaks. Victims described their perception of time dissolving. Hours felt like mere seconds, while seconds dragged into agonizing hours. The mind failed long before the physical body did. A survivor named Valentin Goncharov confessed that he yearned more desperately for rest than for food. "I would have traded 10 bread rations for 1 hour of sleep," he admitted. Once physical exhaustion was ineffective, the tormentors shifted their technique again. Number 4. The theater of falsehood. Prisoners were subjected to extreme torment until they confessed to crimes they had never even heard of. Every single admission extracted in the Gulag interrogation rooms was fundamentally secured through bloodshed. The sessions were not a search for truth, but a forced demonstration of absolute subservience. The singular objective was to compel the victim to sign anything. Fists, boots, iron bars, and wooden blocks were the tools of the interview. Many faced continuous, grinding questioning for 10 to 12 hours. Some were beaten with sodden, thick towels to avoid leaving visible bruises. Others were forced to kneel on jagged glass shards or iron rods until their legs swelled and their skin ripped open. One officer boasted he could make a man, after just 3 nights, confess to murdering Lenin himself. Historians found records at Moscow's Butyrka prison showing prisoners signed detailed confessions for crimes committed years before they were even born. The psychological assault was relentless. Guards threatened to arrest and torture family members, wives, parents, children, if the prisoner failed to cooperate. Survivors claimed the absolute worst moment came after the signature. They were then forced to repeat their false confessions in open court with a convincing smile. Refusing this final, humiliating performance meant an immediate trip back to the basement for further explanation. But those who resisted, those who maintained an unbreakable silence, faced something far more insidious, a punishment disguised as medical aid. Number 3. The psychiatric weapon. When beatings and starvation failed, the Gulag system unleashed its doctors. People were injected with potent drugs and confined to psychiatric hospitals, the so-called Soviet treatment. Psychiatry was simply weaponized. Anyone who refused to make a confession was deemed legally incompetent and transferred to a specialized hospital. In theory, this was medical assistance. In reality, it was a laboratory of human degradation. Patients were shackled to beds for weeks. Doctors injected powerful narcotics that induced extreme muscle cramps, severe fever, and terrifying hallucinations. Some were submerged in ice baths for hours, shivering until they blacked out. Others were strapped into chairs while high-voltage electrical currents were run through their skulls, a therapy to achieve compliance. The Soviet regime called it re-education through treatment. The patients called it a second chemical prison. A report from the 1970s detailed a ward where prisoners screamed for days, forbidden from sleep. Nurses simply walked past, acting as if nothing was happening. Officially, the goal was the healing of political madness, meaning any opinion that deviated from state doctrine. Writers, priests, and professors were confined in wards intended for violent criminals. Many who entered this facility never returned to a normal existence. Their bodies eventually left the hospital, but their minds remained permanently broken within. Those who survived often confronted an even darker reality, a humiliation based not on pain, but on the utter loss of their human dignity. If you are finding this shocking, please take a second to hit the like button. It helps expose these hidden histories to more people. Now, let's continue with the final 2 methods. Number 2. The architecture of degradation. Sexual assault and pervasive terror were wielded as tools more effective than any physical chain in the camp. Inside the camp system, the concept of limits simply evaporated. Guards held total control. For women, survival meant living in a continuous, grinding fear of sexual violence. No law existed within the Gulag to protect them, and silence became their only shield. Survivor testimonies recount nights where guards entered the women's barracks after dark. They selected whomever they desired, sometimes trading food rations for the right to abuse them. Some women entered into protective relationships with officers solely to survive. Pregnancy brought no reprieve. Women who gave birth were sent back to work the very next day. Their babies were almost immediately removed and placed in state orphanages while the mothers returned to the mines. Official records indicate that over 20,000 infants were born in the Gulag during the 1940s. Most of them never saw their parents again. Men were subjected to a different form of sadistic violence. Guards forced them to fight one another for food or for pure entertainment. Those who refused were stripped naked, beaten, and publicly humiliated. In some camps, prisoners were forced to crawl on the ice while others watched and laughed. But even if the suffering in the camp ended, the punishment did not cease, because in Stalin's system, guilt spread like a deadly, relentless shadow, striking the entire family unit. Number 1. The inheritance of guilt. Entire families were targeted to ensure absolutely no one escaped the pervasive reach of the Gulag. The Soviet regime was never satisfied with just the body. They sought to inflict pain across generations. If a man was taken to the Gulag, his wife and children were often incarcerated in a different type of cell, one constructed entirely of fear. Families were deliberately used as key components in the state's torture machine. Guards would whisper during interrogations, "Your wife is next. Your son has already been detained." Sometimes it was a lie, but the psychological effect was devastatingly real. These words broke men faster than any physical whip. For those who still refused to confess, forged letters were presented, allegedly from their wives, stating they had been unfaithful. Watching this complete mental decay, seeing love itself rot from within, was the ultimate objective. In Moscow, wives were locked in freezing rooms with dripping walls and forced to listen to recordings of their husbands' screams. Even children were not spared. By 1940, over 300,000 families had been destroyed in this way. Every single person was transformed into a weapon against their own kin. The most terrifying aspect? Even after the sentences were served, no one truly knew when the torture had finally stopped. These are the 10 most horrifying methods of psychological and physical torture used in the Soviet Gulag. History hides its darkest truths in these silent corners. We are eager to hear your thoughts on this video. If you were shocked by any of these methods, please leave a comment and a like. Right there, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to ensure you never miss another deep dive. And if you have any hype left, please stick around and watch our latest video. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.